Now, statements by Israel's far-right national security minister calling for 30 to 40 people in Gaza to be killed every night have provoked condemnation in Germany and across Europe. Itamar Ben-Gvir was speaking on a podcast hosted by an Israeli who was taken hostage during the October 7th, 2023 attacks and held in Gaza.
Some say that with time, we forget. But I think no one forgets the 7th of October. And you're right to focus on the 8th of October, on recovery. By the way, this is our rehabilitation and their destruction. In these days we're talking, it's no secret I disagree with the Prime Minister. I think targeted assassinations should be carried out in Gaza, taking down 30 to 40 every night, not just those who pose an immediate threat. There are people there who are not worthy of life. They shouldn't live. They're not even people. I'm giving them a compliment by calling them people.
Now, in Germany, the foreign policy spokesperson for the governing Christian Democrats called for European Union action against Ben-Gvir. Jürgen Hart said that sanctions would be a sign of the universal validity of human dignity and human rights. The European Union says sanctions against Ben-Gvir are already under consideration.
The EU expects Israel to comply with all its obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, and the protection of civilians needs to be ensured at all times. I would like also to recall that we have a proposal currently in the Council to include Ben-Gvir on the sanction list under the global human rights sanctions regime. And the EU calls for the full implementation of the UNC 2803 in line with the other relevant UN Security Council resolution and international legal principles.
And let's get more now. We're joined by DW's Rosie Burchard, who is standing by in Brussels. What's the reaction been there, Rosie?
Well, you heard a bit of that there from the EU Commission spokesperson. That was in response to a question I went to ask her. And first of all, she said, look, I will not comment on comments, but she went on to raise the point, and this is the crucial one, that a proposal to sanction Minister Ben-Gvir has been on EU member states' table for almost a year now, Sarah. That was first put forward by the EU Commission, so that's the EU's executive here in Brussels, back in September 2025. That's because long before these latest comments caused outrage, Ben-Gvir had been widely accused of incitement to violence against Palestinians, and he is, we should note, already sanctioned by a number of non-EU countries that are often seen as like-minded. For example, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. But the fact is that no EU action can be taken without agreement from all EU member states. So far, that's proved impossible to reach.
Could sanctions against a sitting Israeli minister actually become reality, and what could that look like?
The only thing standing in the way of these sanctions is political disunity in the EU. The proposal is very clearly there. Now, how did we get here? Back in 2025, the sanctions were put forward by the EU Commission, and at that time there was a really mixed response among these member states. The debate really flared up again this year, 2026, in the month of May, when the video of Ben-Gvir taunting activists who were part of the so-called flotilla was made public, and that sparked a major outcry. At that point, several European countries, including Italy, which were themselves critical of the actions of those activists, were extremely angry about how Ben-Gvir appeared to be taunting those activists, and there was really evidence, they said, of abuse. That being said, despite all this outcry, that was still not enough to move these sanctions forward. We know that one country at least said on the record it was intending to block it, that is Czechia, and at the time, Germany had said it didn't think any sanctions against Ben-Gvir were necessary. Now, in the context of that, several EU countries who appeared really frustrated by this apparent total incapacity to act here decided to go it alone. So back in 2025, we already saw Slovenia and the Netherlands essentially declare Ben-Gvir persona non grata. The same happened with Spain. They banned him from entering their territory. And then this year, France did the same in response to this flotilla video. So that's kind of the context of where things sit at the moment. The key date to watch, I would say, is early September. That's That's when EU foreign ministers are next due to meet. And you can be sure that this is now going to come up again in light of these latest comments, which have drawn such widespread condemnation.
You briefly mentioned Germany there, and I'd like to ask you, given Germany's history, it has a special relationship with Israel. What role do you see Germany playing in this European debate now?
Look, Germany often cites that relationship when it defends, and it should be clear that this is a defence because many other EU member states have expressed on the record frustration with Germany. Its position, which has broadly been on many EU-level proposed sanctions against the Israeli government or Israeli interests, to block them. Now, we did see earlier this year the EU greenlighting sanctions against extremist Israeli settlers. Germany was absolutely on board with that. But when it comes to bigger measures, the likes of a proposal to downgrade trade ties with Israel, remember the EU is Israel's biggest trade partner, Germany is absolutely not on board. Now, it claims that this measure would be ineffective. It wants to privilege dialogue, but that has drawn fierce criticism from rights watchdogs who really accuse the EU of dragging its feet here and failing to use its leverage in a situation where they say there's very clear evidence of widespread human rights abuses. The Israeli claim here is that any sanctions against the Israeli government or its interests only serve to strengthen Hamas. But that is something that when I've put that exact claim to EU ministers and EU officials, they heavily rebut that. The fact is, this remains a bloc which is deeply and bitterly divided on the topic of how to approach relations with Israel. The upcoming Israeli election is probably only going to put those EU divisions into sharper focus. And this debate is going to rumble on, and those accusations of EU failure to act will also continue.
Rosie Burchard in Brussels, thank you. We are joined now by Hildegard Bentele. She is a member of the European Parliament for the Conservative CDU and the head of the delegation for the EU's relations with Israel. Thank you so much for joining us here at DW.
Pleasure's mine.
What was your reaction when you heard a serving Israeli cabinet member, calling for 30 to 40 people to be killed in Gaza every night?
Well, Ben-Gvir is a known person, and he had made many statements, which were over the top, which were unacceptable from a European point of view. And this is why, he is being sanctioned already by some members of the European Union, some member states, also by Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Canada. So, I wouldn't say it's nothing new, but you also have to see the context. He has been questioned by a hostage, and this is also the context of his, request for the death penalty, the idea that, people get away without being punished.
It was a bit beyond that, this particular comment. I mean, he also talked about how he believed that these people were not worthy of life. Rhetoric like this, to what extent do you see this dehumanizing Palestinians and further undermining civilian protection?
Well, there's a process of dehumanization ongoing since the 7th of October, and the biggest act of dehumanization is the 7th of October. Babies have been burned, women have been raped, and people have held hostage, starved for more than 700 days. So, there's a history of dehumanization, which was, started by the attack of 7th of October. So we have to put this into the context, which I don't want to justify it, but it makes it unacceptable until the very day. And I think also, to eliminate individuals is for us in Europe unacceptable, but just another context. We know the assassination of Osama bin Laden, and so it is the way how you deal with terrorists who do not want to disarm, who do not want to, negotiate, who do not want to have a political solution, is a difficult one.
Now you have some European and German politicians very, very vocally calling for sanctions targeting Ben-Gvir personally now. Is that realistic, the EU sanctioning an Israeli minister?
It is realistic, I think. I was
why haven't they done it already?
For this. I was asking for this for a year.
But why haven't they done it already?
I cannot tell you. It is. I think. these are political figures, but they are very radical figures. They contradict, European values. So, but every member state can do this individually. I mean, we talked about other things which I also found a distraction, like the suspension of the trade association agreement, about illegal settlements and so on. But I mean, we could do much more in the meantime. So no, we didn't do it.
Do you believe personally that this will be the moment that happens?
It's difficult. I mean, it's a political thing. We are in pre-election times. What does it now? What kind of results will it give? And I think it will, just support them even more. So I said, do this a year ago, then it could have some effects. Then everybody knew that these are the people who initiate violence, who are completely contradict what the EU wants, and then we could have some effects in the last year. Maybe we could have prevented some of these kind of statements. But now it's very difficult in our moment, I would say.
What specifically do you believe sanctions should entail?
Sanctions should target those who initiate and act violently, who violate agreements, political agreements, who put military before diplomatic or political solutions, who contradict the two-state solutions. These should be the targeted sanctions we should have.
I want to take it beyond Ben-Gvir now and talk about the Israeli government more broadly. Do you believe that Netanyahu has a responsibility to publicly reject Ben-Gvir's remarks? And what should Europe conclude if he does not?
Absolutely, he should put his minister at his place. He did this in the past with regard to the West Bank. We saw reactions.
And if he doesn't?
I would like to repeat, we are in a pre-election phase. So this is a phase, and this is the same in Germany, in Europe, all over the place, where you have more radical, statements from all parties, because they want to deliver some messages to their own groups, So, and he delivers to his very radical group. So I think the moment is now, this is a moment of radicalization, of pre-election phase. So I think we should wait for the new government and should leave the decision to the Israeli people to hopefully elect a new government which is more moderate, which puts diplomacy before military action, and which also, is opting for a different stance on how to treat Palestinians.
Should the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz condemn the statement?
No, he would never condemn. I don't think he would condemn any. This is not his government. This is not his minister. He can determine the German position. I mean, no.
He shouldn't condemn it. So EU sanctions should be leveled on him. There should be this broad. I mean, why not have Friedrich Merz
he
say this is an unacceptable comment?
Yeah, but he's unacceptable. This person is unacceptable from the very beginning. From his whole, he had made many statements, many actions. He can. I don't expect the Chancellor Merz to go after Ben-Gvir after all his statements and his action, which are completely unacceptable. He would make, and he would be in a constant challenge to condemn him. This is not his role.
But I mean, Germany in general, it does have a very special role. And, I'm sure that the Chancellor is quite aware of that, being, one of Israel's closest allies, both globally and also here in Europe. We're seeing the government in Israel shifting farther and farther to the right with comments like these. German support for Israel right now, do you see it eroding?
Well, I think we are now waiting for a new government. We are waiting for elections. This is a democracy, and I think it's no secret that we would wish, a more moderate government, which puts, as I said, political diplomatic solutions before military ones. We fully support the Board of Peace. As I said many times, there are peace efforts ongoing. We have a ceasefire, but we have at the same moment Iran, who escalated. We have the Lebanon talks. So, I mean, there are many things going on, but this is the moment where we should give democracy a say. It's the Israeli people who decide about their government. But I would like to underline these are two very small parties, 6 MPs, 7 MPs, but the majorities are very tight. So Netanyahu is relying on one vote plus. So he depends on, which is terrible. And I wish for another coalition in which these two parties and these radical extremes from both sides do not play a role, as well as in Germany, all over the place. With the extremes, you have very bad results. But you should not. You should go for midstream and centered positions. This is, I think, a Christian Democrat, conservative CDU position, which I would recommend.
Member of the European Parliament, Hildegard Bentele, thank you so much for joining us here on DW. We appreciate it.
Well, let's get more on this from Miret F. Mabrouk, who's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for joining us. Itamar Ben-Gvir oversees Israel's police and prison service. What does it tell us about the state of Israeli politics that such extreme comments have come from a member of the government?
Well, thank you for having me on. These are not the first extreme comments that Minister Ben-Gvir has made. He's famous for making them. This is the same minister that celebrated pushing through an execution for Palestinians only law and celebrated his wedding anniversary with a cake with a noose on it to symbolize this. So this is not unusual for him. It is indicative, however, of how far right and how extremist the Israeli government now is, and how little we can expect any of their ministers, I think, to temper their comments, particularly with elections coming up.
Because the silence from Benjamin Netanyahu has been deafening, and even though Ben-Gvir seemed to make a point of drawing the Prime Minister into this controversy, I disagree with the Prime Minister, he said. As you say, Israel has elections in less than 3 months. Who was he trying... What do you think he was trying to do with these comments? Is this just the way he talks? Just nothing unusual about this?
Okay, so I think it is actually the way he talks. I think it's very much the way he thinks. There's nothing new about this. This is very much Minister Ben-Gvir, but the fact that he is now forthright again saying, and because very often we have these thoughts, but we don't spew them out on national television or on podcasts. But the fact that he is doing it with such confidence, I think, indicates two things. One, he knows perfectly well that there won't be any pushback from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu because of the elections coming up. But also, those comments are sometimes not, they're not really directed at an outside clientele, if you like. They are, again, taking into account the elections that are coming up in a few months' time.
Tell us more.
And they are there to cater to right fringe.
Tell us more, then, about that idea, because the idea that a member of your own government says we should kill 30 to 40 Palestinians every day, and you as Prime Minister think, that it is not in your interest to slap these comments down, or indeed may go against you? Just what's going on there?
So I think what you're looking at is the most far-right government that Israel has ever seen. And this government has really come into its own after what happened on October the 7th. Because what happened on October 7th, I think you have to realize, really shook the Israeli psyche. They were no longer invisible. A lot of people died. 1,200 people died, 250 people taken hostage. It was a knock to the psyche. But as with many such incidents, among nations, it does bring to the fore an extremist nationalist front, and this is very much the case. Itamar Ben-Gvir is not on his own. He's simply one of the most famous, and this is what you're looking at now. But Bezalel Smotrich, who's the finance minister, is just as famous for making these comments. He's advocated for forced displacement. I think he called it voluntary immigration, which was funny. And the heritage minister Amichai Eliyahu, I think. He was, he said during a meeting that dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza was a possibility. It's not unusual. It just indicates the direction that this coalition has taken. And I think this is the important thing that you need to look at here. This is a coalition, and Prime Minister Netanyahu needs these people, needs this front for his coalition, and his own survival, perhaps literally, because he is, of course, facing a prison term if he isn't prime minister for fraud. His own survival is linked to him becoming prime minister again. So he's not going to put up a fight for all this. And you have to remember that he's never been particularly diplomatic about Palestinians either.
Right, and as you say. Not a massive outcry in Israel over these comments because they've heard it all before. Is there likely, though, to be much sympathy there for what he had to say?
My understanding of Israeli politics is at the moment there is very much sympathy for this. Israeli society as a whole has taken a serious swing to the right. They've become significantly more hardened. You have to really look for people who are still interested in a two-state solution or in peace. So he's no longer a huge outlier. He might have been before, but these comments really aren't. I mean, to Israeli society, aren't particularly shocking.
Thank you so much for guiding us through that so clearly. Miret F. Mabrouk from the Middle East Institute.
You're welcome.